Hello there, Sir from 17 once again. This is my Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep critical Terra walkthrough. This is Neverland, and Neverland is usually a spiking difficulty, so you'll notice when I'm hitting these enemies, my damage once again is not going to be the same as it was. We're still not weak, though we're still doing okay, but you're going to see just a general lack of the finesse and the power and the destruction that you might have got in some of the earlier levels. Because each of the places that you visit in this game is incrementally more difficult than the last when it comes to the number of people's level. Doesn't necessarily mean the level's harder, because of course everybody will struggle with different things. It just means that, for the most, unless you've got a new keyblade or you've got some new techniques, you will have to hit people quite a lot. At the moment, it looks like we're okay. I've seen worse than this, but this gorilla's going to test us because he has a lot of life and he does a lot of damage. And we were able to hopefully hit him for some good damage. We've got Mega Flare! Damn! We got all the moves. And it seemed to do nothing, which is disappointing. Maybe it missed. Come on, Bahamut, what the fuck are you playing at? But we can launch him, which is useful. I'm going for the bird. It's the bird that I'm not so happy with, because those birds can do some sick damage when they want to. Camera's loving it right now. There he goes, he's dead. Look, you see the damage that bird did from a single peck? It took 1/3 of my life. So be very, very careful with highly mobile, highly dangerous enemies. But as much as this level is a step up in challenge, it's always a fun challenge, and it's always a fun level. I do like the Peter Pan level. I did a lot of farming here when I was doing the abilities on my first run, because you can keep going inside the treehouse and coming outside and fighting two of the gorillas. Be careful of that move there. That charge he does is very dangerous. And of course you can parry a lot of these moves, but in my current state, one missed parry is generally death, so doing it is kind of risky, and I would rather just use what I know is safe to... Oh, there it was. Anyway, I stopped it with a parry, so there's an example of how you can stop that move. Make sure you've got your back against the wall, though, because you don't want him doing some kind of funky banana move and curving round like Roberto Carlos, or you'll be in trouble. As you can hear, one of the worst parts of Kingdom Hearts, which I wish you could turn off, that stupid klaxon when you're dying. I don't need to know that I'm dying, game. I know that I'm dying. I'm fucking up. I have no life in the bar. You don't have to be there going dying, 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 dying like some kind of drunk seal. It's horrible. And I'll never understand why it exists. Like, anybody needs to be told when they're dying. There are some games that convey that kind of information very poorly, where you don't even realise you're close to death. Then there are other games where it's a bit too much. Have the picture flash, have the bar be empty and be red and shit, but don't flash at me. You know, don't have the entire fire brigade circling my house. I don't need that. It's ridiculous. What are we doing here? So we're removing Aeroga because we've got it maxed and we want to do something else max. And we're just working on getting some of these better abilities. Apparently I'm not taking it off. Maybe I think that it's too useful in this level. Who knows? I guess you'll see. But it's one of those strange designs, isn't it? It kind of goes back to the whole first-person shooters and fucking with the screen. It became a widely known and utilised paradigm of gaming where we would use this notion that when you take damage, your eyes get fucked. It's like when you're receiving oral sex. It's almost like there's a part of your body that's connected to your eyes, and your eyes start getting all weird and wanting to close, and you can't keep them open, and it's weird because it's relaxing and there's all these other elements. Well, when you get shot, it's like that, only things get brighter or darker depending on artistic credit, and you're of course bukkakied in blood. There's no middle ground here, guys. You can't get shot in the leg without a nice bukkak of blood on the old screen. And it's just bizarre, because on a game where everything is your vision, they fuck with your vision. Can you imagine an alternative world where in that meeting where whoever came up with the idea of visual damage representations on screens to obscure your vision before you heal, everybody else in the meeting's like, but the player needs to see, are you high? And it never became a thing. That would be a really strange place to live in gaming right now, because how else do we convey damage? Other than by these visual tells, we don't. It used to be life bars, but life bars were deemed archaic, and we need to move away from life bars because they take us out of the experience. They're not immersive enough. What a load of bollocks that is. Like, that attitude is just everything wrong with gaming for me. There's a time and a place for immersion, but it ain't in character action games. Like, if you're playing those games for story, then you're pretty hardcore, because everyone else is playing them for gameplay, son. And I don't give a fuck if I'm not immersed. I'm in that fight. I'm doing that fight. I'm watching for micro expressions and movements to punish them. Like, it's all happening very quickly. Come on now, enough with this bullshit. But it's just messing with the screen. And Bayonetta does it too, you know, one of my all-time favourite games. It has claws clawing at the edges of the screen. So does God Hand. God Hand makes the corners of the screen kind of glow red, but it's not distracting enough to detract away from what you're doing. It's not a moment where you're suddenly annoyed and irritated by a constant noise. Like, I put a video up the other day of me beating the optional boss, the Lingering Spirit, Vanitas guy. It's a really shitty boss because he counters almost everything you do, and you can barely get any hits on him, and then when you do hit him, you do no damage. So the entire fight takes forever, and he kills you in 1 to 2 hits regardless of level. It's a shit fight. It's not all that interesting, but, you know, you can get there in the end. Half of that fight is me in low life with that awful noise playing. Like, and it's a good job that I did it with mute, because I didn't have volume on when I was doing that fight. I was probably watching UFC or listening to a podcast or something. Because I wouldn't have been able to do it, because the constant like dumbass elephant seal in my ear really frustrates me. And it's designed too, it's a choice. People okayed it and said it was good. And I'll never get it. There's a lot of stuff like that. Like, if you've ever played The Wonderful 101, that is a game that I adore, and I think it's a game that everybody should play because it's so different from anything you'll have ever played before. And that's what makes it really special. The fact that it is so great for being something so vastly different. But there are points in that game where, in its ambition to be like a Saturday morning cartoon and be over the top with like comic strip narrative vignettes with stuff on the screen everywhere, a game that is already incredibly confusing to follow unless you know exactly what you're doing and you've played it for a large amount of time, gets even more difficult to physically see because there's all this shit on the screen, and behind it, insanity is happening. Like, a Pikmin orgy of violence is happening in the background with hundreds of characters involved and hundreds of effects happening at the same time, so it's already hard to see, and then there's all this shit happening on your screen blocking your view of what is already a difficult image, you know? Stuff like that is a great idea, but there should be an option to remove it, because when you play for gameplay afterwards and the story has no attention or anything whatsoever in your brain because you're there for the game, you don't want the fucking cutscenes popping up and doing narrative while you're trying to beat a boss who's really tricky. Like, that stuff is great the first time, you know, it's that beautiful one-time thing that loses its value the second time. You know, almost all emotionally resonant, interesting plot devices in video games that prove to be a twist or some kind of significance are not enjoyable the second time around. Like, look at No Russian in Modern Warfare 2. That is a sequence where you spend the entire time questioning your actions, curious what the hell you're doing, because you're shooting Americans in an airport and it's weird. The entire time you feel like you shouldn't be partaking in it, maybe you weren't. Or maybe you were the guy that's just like, I'm shooting anything, it's a first-person shooter. Like, I was too busy trying to shoot glass and stuff and seeing when I could break in the environment because it was a new game and I fuck about like that. But the emotional resonance of it was impactful because it led to the ultimate betrayal that sets off that game. The second time through, I just fast-walked to the end because I wanted to play. Like, I was tempted to put that filter on that skips the level because it's like, I don't want to do that again. You know, in Bioshock, the famous twist in Bioshock, you forget that when you get there, when you just want to play the game, you have to stand in that room and watch flashbacks and listen to Andrew Ryan talk for like 15 minutes and you can't skip it. So you just kind of, yeah, this was awesome and I still think it's genius, but can I get to the fucking game, please? And it's these things that we don't seem to realise, or developers at the time must be so in love with, that they don't think that there's an alternative to it. And it comes back to an ideal that I think we need to move towards, which is this idea of separating the cinematic playthrough from the actual game playthrough. And I think you can do that by having an option perhaps after they've beaten the game, or maybe even before, buried in the menus, where the person who's actually looking for it has to go there to find it. And it would just be this notion that anything that isn't you controlling the character can be skipped directly to you controlling the character. It doesn't detract from the experience because the person who wants this doesn't give a fuck about your story, doesn't give a fuck about your slow walking set piece where two characters develop each other. They don't want that. There are people, believe it or not, folks, who don't even watch the cutscenes in any of the games they play. They just get straight to the gameplay. They couldn't tell you the names, they couldn't tell you the motivations, they couldn't tell you it. And to them, watching the story is weird. So there's something for everybody, but at the moment we're only tailoring these experiences to the person who wants it all, who wants this ideal vision of what the developer wants to show. And I don't think that that's good enough anymore. I think it should be... There should be a choice. Like, even if you make it the Konami code, enter the Konami code, it unlocks the hardest difficulty and it enables you to skip every cutscene and piece of dialogue to get you to gameplay. That to me sounds beautiful. Uncharted 4 is a game that has so much love and attention paid to its narrative and its cinematicness. Regardless of whether or not you think the story is good, there's a lot of love that's gone into crafting every single scene in that game. And then there's an option where you skip the scenes and all you do is play gameplay. And it's close to being great, because unfortunately I think it skips some parts that are more gameplay than they think are gameplay, and I think that they were needed. But it's still a step in the right direction, and if Uncharted, which is a game that has all of this potential, all of this cinematic prowess, all of this, renowned for being the closest thing we have to like a Hollywood blockbuster when it comes to something that you want to care about and can actually conceive as being interesting, rather than Oscar Mike Charlie Bravo bollocks simulator first-person shooter mode Call of Duty goodness. And even then, at that highest of pedigrees, they let you skip that shit? That's perfect. And that's wonderful foresight from Naughty Dog. Because they know there's people who want to play that game without that shit. And they want to get to the game. And they allow you to do that. And as I say, they nearly hit it. It's 96% good. There's a little bit left where I wish it was just tweaked ever so slightly. But for the most... it's a wonderful new idea, and I hope that becomes a new paradigm. I want to be able to get to the game. I don't want there to be barriers to entrances or gates at every stage. It's so easy now to stop playing. They should make it so that you don't want to, because that's what they're doing right now. Every game company is vying for your attention, and the market's never been this saturated. But thank you for watching. You take care now.